Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Jonny Lipsham.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the very first Sunday Night Live of 2021. Hope everybody has had a great New Year's weekend. Nice long weekend. I certainly did. I had a lot of fun with my family. Unfortunately, because we're in Tier 4 here in Scotland now, pretty much couldn't go anywhere. There were no celebrations, there were no fireworks, there were no nothing. So we had an indoors celebration, just me, my wife, and my kids. And we just made the best of it that we could. And we had a very, very pleasant time. We had a Zoom call with my relatives. We tried to gather as many relatives from around the world as we could onto one call at one time, which is actually pretty hard when we've got family in most continents of the world. So that was quite tricky to organize, but it was great, and it was just nice to be able to kind of talk to family and friends from around the world, some that we don't really get to see very much anymore because of where they are. So yeah, it was nice. It was good time was had by everybody. And it is now bitterly cold here in Edinburgh. We have had some snow, albeit not that much, but we've certainly had maybe an inch or two over the last few days. And it absolutely lashed it down with rains this afternoon, so it's warmed up a little bit, which washed all the snow away. But now, of course, it's like minus 6 degrees Celsius outside right now, so all of that rainwater has turned to ice. So tomorrow morning it's going to be terrifying if you are driving a car, like my wife will be. So there is all of that. Now, getting to the business of tonight's show, because it's the first show of the year, and we kind of talked about aspirations for the year, things that we would like to achieve in the year musically. We kind of talked about that on the New Year's Eve show. So I'm not the kind of guy that thinks about New Year's resolutions or anything like that, but I certainly like to plan. And I certainly like to have an idea of things that I would like to accomplish over the year. So, maybe that's what we could talk about tonight, is kind of, hey, what are the kind of like the big goals that we would like to hit over the course of 2021. And I suppose one of them, for most of us, is going to be coping with various stages of lockdown and receiving the vaccine when that becomes available for you to receive it. I'm sure, that's going to be on most people's lists as non-music related subjects. And I totally, agree with all of those. But yeah, it'd be good if we could talk about kind of, what would we like to achieve? And for some of us, that might be, we just want to release a song. For others of us, it may well be, hey, I want to put out an EP this year, or a full-length album this year, or I want to have mixed a certain number of clients' records this year. That'd be, those are the kind of things that we can talk about. I think that'd be pretty good. And also taking your questions, because that's kind of the big part of this show, really, is kind of just taking your questions. But I'd also like us to talk about Studio One and, features that we'd like to see added to Studio One over the course of this year. Now, I work for Personas, so I can't really say anything about what's gonna come up over the next year. And most of that is because some of that I don't actually know. But even the things that I do know, I couldn't tell you anyway. But it would be great if you guys could maybe just Put into the chat kind of, things that you think, hey, this would be a great feature to see added to Studio One. And just kind of say, hey, where would we like Studio One to be in 12 months' time? That would be cool. So we can talk about those as well. And as usual, let's go up to the top of the chat. And we'll see that first in the door is my trusty moderator, Mike Neighbor. He says, hi there. That was at an hour before showtime. And Tony Stringer was in just after that. He says, I go to sleep soon, so I'll catch up in the morning. Tony, if you're watching this on the replay, thanks for coming and thanks for watching. I always appreciate you watching my shows. You are a very valued supporter. Thank you very much. Music to Motion says, howdy folks. I may be late. I have to run to the pharmacy before they close. I'll check in when I get home. Cool. Well, I hope you are able to get here to at least some of it. And, the rest of it you can catch up with on the replay. Just Bob is here. Thomas is here. Kyle is here. You're talking about mixing vocals and particularly tricky issues with some vocals. Yeah, I've been having a couple of those as well, where I've had to deal with some funky EQs on a vocal track recently. So you're not alone with that one. Vital Coron is here. Garan Livingston is here. He says, G'day all. G'day to you too. Garan, hope you're okay, mate. Bill Shepherd is here. Alan, who is PLM, is also here. John Lake is here. Martin Weeks is here. He says, hey there! There's the capitals bit. Everybody, hope your New Year weekend was good. Let's see who else is here. Mika Han is here. Hey Mika, how you doing? Hope you and your family are well and hanging in there. It's tough, definitely. And he's hoping that everyone is recovered from New Year. Yep. I think so. Just about. Let's see. Martin says, not even minor small fireworks in the backyard. There were some folks around here that let off some fireworks. And I think kind of the police have been going around. I'm just making sure that it's just kind of like family and those kind of people that are in attendance, and there's not like a crowded house or anything like that. So they were doing that. Martin, that's funny. Just Bob says, I watched Kiss live in Dubai. Didn't do pay-per-view. Found it streaming live on YouTube. Wow, didn't know that. Let's see. My neighbor says, my first goal is to learn MIDI or die trying. Good luck with that. Now, here's the interesting thing about MIDI, is that MIDI has hardly changed a bit since 1996, which is when the last update for MIDI was done. Prior to that, the previous update was in 1986. So there's like a 10-year gap between updates for MIDI to the protocol and to features and the specification and all of that. And then since 1996, there's been pretty much no development work done until they started floating the idea of MIDI 2.0 maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. And now they're kind of ready to launch MIDI 2.0 on the world, which is awesome. And it's kind of a considerably new, or it's going to be a considerably new specification with some new features and some new capabilities. And there are some manufacturers that are already putting out hardware instruments and keyboards and things like that that are MIDI 2.0 capable. We're going to have to see how different software companies in the industry catch up with that, or what they choose to do with MIDI 2.0, or what. I don't know. I don't think there's been any software company that's really made any kind of announcements about 2.0 at all. So I don't think you're going to see any action on MIDI 2.0 for maybe a year, maybe 18 months, maybe 2 years. We'll have to kind of wait and see, but certainly there's been a lot of talk, and there's been some papers released. There was a conference. I think last year there was a conference just as kind of coronavirus was beginning to hit. So it was meant to be a conference that you traveled to, but it ended up being an online conference, and you purchased a ticket for it. So I purchased a ticket for the MIDI conference, MIDI 2.0 conference, and it was a 3-day event, and some of it was really, really dull, but there were moments where you kind of got excited about the potential of MIDI 2.0 and how it could be implemented in both software and hardware, and kind of like the future of MIDI is actually pretty rosy, I think, personally. But yes, MIDI is a big, big thing to get your head into. Let's see, what else do we have here? R.I.P. Jerry Marston of Jerry and the Pacemakers. Yes, I read that this morning about Jerry having died. He wasn't actually that terribly old either. But yeah, that's pretty sad. One of my colleagues who I have worked with for a lot of years, who is a fantastic guitar player in his own right, is a guy called Tim Rose. I've worked with him a lot, and he was a sideman. He was in Jerry's backup band for a lot of years, so he knew him pretty well. So it was nice to talk to Tim about kind of, what was Jerry like? Because obviously I never had the chance to know him, but he certainly did. So it was interesting to talk about that. Let's see, what else do we have? Carl says survival first, better mixes after that. Yeah, I think I could agree with that. Mike says I want to get into modular synthesis as well. Mike, let me point you in the general direction of a YouTube channel called Molten Music Technology. It is run by a very good friend of mine who I have known for a good few years. He and I have done some music curriculum work together. And he is a modular synth expert. His name is Robin Vincent, and he runs the Molten Music Technology website company. He builds computers for DAWs, that kind of stuff, as well as being on the cutting edge of music technology journalism. So he and I have collaborated a fair bit on various educational products and projects, like maybe, sort of 10, 11, 12 years ago. But yeah, we're still pretty good mates. So I definitely say go and check out his YouTube channel. In fact, I recommend everybody go check out his channel because A, it's really interesting what he talks about. B, he's hilarious. And C, he is very, very quintessentially English and quirky, and he's a great guy. He is incredibly knowledgeable about his subject, and he built the first Pro Tools PC, in fact, a few years back, and kind of exported to the United States and all of that as well. So he is a pretty cool guy, and you do well to get to watch some of his videos. Martin says, same as past year, improved my overall health, get significant placements in music on TV, film, and get out of America. Okay, fair enough. Remember the rules about politics here, Martin, but yep, fair enough. Carl says, get back to singing, guitaring as a regular endeavor. Absolutely. Certain items in version 5 put into version 4, even if they're paid add-ons. Yeah, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. And the reason why that's not going to happen is because now that we have Studio One 5, development work is no longer happening on Studio One 4. So nothing is going to be added to Studio One 4. In fact, there are, or at least there were, maybe 1 or 2 latent bugs in Studio One 4 that are fixed in Studio One 5. So if you encounter those bugs in Studio One 4, you're out of luck unless you want to upgrade to Studio One 5 to have those actually fixed. So, but yeah, that's what the very last update for Studio One 4 was all about. It was making sure any latent bugs were fixed, and I think we got every one of them, but there might be one or two floating about still. But yes, there will be no further developments or updates or features added to Studio One version 4. If you want to see anything new added to Studio One, it's going to be built into Studio One 5. But yeah, I don't want to dampen your enthusiasm, Martin, for things that you would like to see in the future of Studio One, for sure. Key switch control. In the MIDI editor, yeah, key switches are a much improved thing in Studio One 5, and they are only going to get better, for sure, especially, with orchestral libraries and stuff like that. I can see that improving significantly as version 5 unfolds. Let's see. Bob Studios is here. He says, "Hi all, it's been a while." Yes, my friend, it certainly has, but I am glad you are here. Welcome to the show. And the chat has just jumped on me. I hate it when that happens. But I am very glad you're here, my friend. Let's see. Bob says, looking forward to another songwriting challenge that you and JG did a couple of years ago. Yeah, we are talking about songwriting challenges for 2021. So stay tuned. We will have something hammered out, for sure. We are definitely talking about doing more than one challenge for the year. So, yeah, certainly stay tuned to both mine and his channels, and you'll see some of that, hopefully. The new MIDI has not happened yet. No, it hasn't. But it's imminent because there was, like I say, there was a conference last year, and there is all sorts of movement in terms of hardware products being developed that will support it. So it is going to be a thing. It is coming. Mike says, "I want to have all the controls available without having to use a MIDI controller and mouse together." Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that could happen. I think there are some features and some functionality of any DAW software where you will have to use a mouse. Like if you want to drag and drop something, that is something that's going to require a mouse or a trackpad or one of those stupid little trackball things, which I just cannot get to like in the slightest. But yeah, I think otherwise you may well see some of that coming. Who knows? Let's see what we got here. Mike says, "I want to eliminate the use of a computer keyboard and mouse as much as possible." Well, yeah. Absolutely, I totally understand that, and I'm pretty sure that, more and more control is going to be developed over the course of time. I think you will see that gradually. Personally for me, because I've been involved in DAWs since the 1980s, the late 80s, early 90s, a mouse is just a thing. It's just the way it always was. So for me, a mouse is just an integral part of what I do. I move the mouse and I kind of do things, and I use keyboard shortcuts. And that's, I use a combination of those too. I always have my hand on my keyboard down here, and my other hand is on my mouse. And then when they're not there, they're on my mixer in front of me. And that's just the thing. Martin says, "I have a rather longly worded question that has come up from discussions with New Library regarding orchestration tracks." You can PM it. I may or may not see it, but if I don't see it, Martin, because I need to kind of concentrate on the chat here as well, I will certainly try and answer you in chat, in your PM, if I can. Carl says the new spec will take a while to get out to the masses. It most certainly will, and that was definitely the impression that I got from the conference. Excuse me, snorting. Let's see. Mike says the problem I'm having is a lot of newer VSTs don't have the MIDI commands programmed into them. Most of the current MIDI standard is aimed at outboard gear. Yeah, some of that is definitely true. And yeah, I think that's kind of mostly to do with the way MIDI protocol currently works, is that it kind of is a little bit out of the box, to be honest. Let's see. Billy Morgan is here. Hey Billy, how you doing, buddy? Good to see you. Welcome to the show. The first one of the year. Awesome. Martin says, well, shucks, as A, can't afford the upgrade even with the discount. B, pointless endeavor till I can replace my current computer. No way around that. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. Very much, actually. Very much sorry about that. I know for a lot of people, finances are tight, indeed. But yeah, if you are able to upgrade to Windows 10 on the current computer you have, you could certainly get access to Persona Sphere, and then you'd get access to Studio 1.5 that way. In fact, you'd get access to pretty much everything that we make and will make going forward. So that's maybe a little worth thinking about there. The mouse slows me down, says Mike. Yeah, I can understand that. Let's see. Okay, Just Bob with a good question here. He says, if a guitar is tuned to open D, what if any changes are required on different instruments like bass? On bass guitar, none. None whatsoever. I mean, you could drop the E string on a bass down to a D. It depends on the style of music that you're dealing with. I mean, if you're playing drop D in a kind of heavy rock or heavy metal situation, then yeah, you may well want to drop the E string down to a D on the bass. And, you know, maybe play it that way. You just have to remember that the intervals between your first two strings is going to be different than standard. But yeah, for the most part, yeah, on a bass guitar, you don't need to think about, really kind of tunings only really affect the guitar. The cool thing with open tunings like Open D or DADGAD or other modal tunings that there are, and there are loads of modal tunings, is that you get access to different voicings that you otherwise wouldn't get from standard tuning on a guitar. And then that means that you open yourself up to a world of, nice kind of piano-like chord textures and voicings. And so those don't really affect other instruments. It really only affects the guitar. It's similar to, in that respect, it's similar to, like a wind synthesizer, for example, like the Akai Iwi. By default, the Iwi is pitched in concert pitch. So what that means is it's in C. But if you're a saxophone player, like if you're a tenor saxophone player by trade, playing in C is going to be uncomfortable. The fingerings are going to be awkward and not familiar and not so easy. So what a lot of tenor sax players that play Iwi do is they transpose it down a whole tone. So they'll transpose it down to B flat because their tenor saxophone is in B flat. So they'll play the Iwi like it's their tenor sax, essentially. So the tuning of the instrument really only affects the performer on that instrument. It's the same for an alto sax player. or a French horn player, or anybody that plays any transposing instrument, is that really the transposition only affects them and how they play their instrument. It doesn't really affect anybody else, providing with the transposition, they are transposing to compensate for the pitch of their instrument, so that everybody's pitches agree, which is what you want in music. You want everyone's pitches to agree. So when I'm playing a C on the piano and I want my French horn player to play a C, because he is in F, he or she is in F, I need to make sure that what I write for them to play compensates for the pitch of their instrument, so that what I write on their chart is going to be a different note than mine. It's not going to be this note here. I'm not going to write a C, but I am going to write a note that compensates for the fact that their instrument is in F, and that's what transposing is all about. It's basically a compensation method to take into account that instrument is in a different pitch. For example, with trumpet, which is a B-flat instrument. Now, if I was to write a C on a trumpet part and then play a C on the piano, you'd get that sound. Why? Because the trumpet player will be playing a whole step lower than what I am playing. So what I need to do for him to play the same C as me, I need to write a D on his chart. He will finger the D on his trumpet, and what comes out of the bell of the trumpet will be the same note as I play. So that's what transposing is all about. So in that sense, kind of an open tuning guitar really only affects the guitarist and doesn't really affect anybody else. Albeit, if I was to write a guitar part for open D tuning, I'm going to actually have to think about what chords and what voicings are possible on a guitar in that tuning. And I would probably have to ask a guitar player, because it's not something that I'm familiar with. So I hope that answers that question. John Lake says, what is the difference between EP and LP? EP is basically an extension of a single. So a single tends to be a single song, and certainly traditionally back in the old little 45 records, it consisted of maybe the single, and then on the flip side of the little 45 record, which they were really small discs, on the other side you'd have like an alternative version or an alternate take or something. So that's kind of what a single was, and an EP is kind of like maybe 4 or 5 songs, and an LP, what did LP stand for? LP standed for long player. So you had like a single, and then you had an LP, the LP being a long player. It was to distinguish the difference between a single, a little 45, and a 33 RPM, much bigger disc, which would have a lot more music on it. You'd have, 8, 9 songs on there. You could maybe squeeze 9 on there, but mostly somewhere between 7 and 8 songs would be on an EP, traditionally back in the 70s and 80s. And of course, now we have CDs, or at least we had CDs. CDs are dying a death now, but certainly in the CD period, that expanded the whole long player out into like 15 songs or more, 15 to 18 songs. So a record could be 15 or 18 songs long, and maybe last an hour or more, an hour and a half worth of music on the one CD. And of course, now with MP3, it's limitless. So you could have 20, 25 songs on an MP3 playlist. Or you could have more if you wanted to, and that could be your product. That could be what you sell. What you sell is, a 25, 30 song, and each one of those songs could be 12, 13, 14 minutes long if you're kind of, an improvisationally based group, like maybe you're, a bit more of a progressive kind of group. So I kind of hope that answers your question. Let's see. Old School Funkasol is here. Good to see you, mate. Welcome to the show. He says Happy New Year. Oh, Marcos Gomez is here. Marcos, thank you very much for your very kind voice message you sent me. That was very kind. Thank you. Martin says, understood, just too many outside issues going on that have stretched all of our savings and monthly stipends. The absolute limit. I totally understand that, my friend. So even a recurring monthly lease can't work. Yeah, okay. Understood. Bobby Bear, thank you very much for the $10 donation. That is very, very kind indeed, and a wonderful way to start the year. Thank you. Garen says, luckily bass don't do chords, if ever. Well, actually they do. Bass players do play chords, interestingly enough. Maybe we don't play each note at the same time, but you can do. You absolutely can do on a bass, and it does get done. Just not very often. No minor or major stuff to deal with. I just leave the bass standard and play the chord root note somewhere and you'd be fine. Yeah, I mean, by and largely, that would be true. I've played with open tuning musicians before. One of the things I did before lockdown was I played with a folk, kind of like an Irish folk / jazz group. And they played in modal tunings quite a lot on their guitars and mandolins and stuff. And I was playing fretless bass. And I would just play in standard normal tuning. But I would know what mode they were in. So I would know, hey, this song is a Dorian mode thing, or this song is a Mixolydian mode thing, or this song is a Phrygian mode. And they would tune their guitars accordingly. And it made for some really interesting sounding and exciting music. To play that kind of stuff. But, understanding some harmony, bass players must know harmony. Bass players must know harmony. You absolutely must. It's one of the essential skills of a bass player is understanding all the different chord types and being able to play the arpeggios of those chords. Being able to play major 7, minor 7, minor 7 flat 5 chords, and, extensions and dominant sevenths and extensions thereof. You kind of need to know that stuff, because you're going to need to be able to play the notes from those chords, on any given song. So, yeah, you kind of need to know harmony. Good to see Music to Motion back. Thank you. Welcome back. Marco says, in general, music is no rules, only two, not weird, so weird sounds and songs giving bad sensations and not exaggerating so much in something in general. A lot of talk about rules, but a lot is subjective depending upon taste and concerns, in my opinion. Yeah, a lot of it is to do with your ear. And what your ear is accustomed to, but also there are rules, believe it or not. There are. I mean, it's like anything in life. There is form and structure to everything in life, and we create within those forms and structures. And even pop songs have form and structure. You have verses, you have choruses, you have pre-choruses, you have breakdowns, there's all sorts of different structural sections that go together to create a pop song. And it's the same with any other art form. A novel has to have a plot. And you have to be able to develop that plot in a way that is logical, that is going to be understood by the reader, and is going to be accepted by the reader, even if you are stretching their imagination. Even if you are suspending their belief to a degree, which, depending upon the genre that you're writing in, you will be doing that. There are forms, there are structures, there are conventions that make things make sense. In fact, it's this. It is the same with how you learn a language. If you are Spanish and you are learning English, one of the things you have to learn is you have to learn sentence structure. You have to learn the grammar. You have to learn the verbs. You have to learn the prepositions, the adverbs, the endings, regular verbs, irregular verbs. And it's the same with, British people learning Spanish or French or German or Russian or Polish or whatever language we want to learn. We have to learn and understand, those conventions and those rules that make language possible, make language understood. Kind of in the same way that somebody from the West, from the Western world goes either on vacation to or to study in a country in the East. For example, if I here in Scotland was to apply to go and study in a Chinese state university, well, one of the things I would have to do is not only learn the language, but I'd have to learn their customs, I would have to learn their culture. Because otherwise, I would find myself very, very out of water very, very quickly and unable to communicate with people in that country, unable to understand why they do what they do, and be completely bamboozled by it all. And also probably would end up being unintentionally offensive to them. Because I would do things the way I do things here in the West that may offend their culture because, that is a foreign concept to them. So, music is the same. Music has form. Music has structure. In as much, even if you're improvising, you're still improvising within a certain framework, be that scales, be that chords or chord tones. Even if you kind of go, hey, let's abandon chords, let's abandon scale structures, and let's just play whatever we feel, whatever comes into our minds, that's fine, and go totally freeform. That's absolutely fine. I've played that kind of music, and I have thoroughly enjoyed that kind of music. But here's the thing. In order for it to work, and in order for it to be enjoyed by somebody else watching or somebody else listening, or, even other participants, it has to be understood. Because it's, music is as much a language as Spanish or German or French or English or Swiss or Belgian or Klingon is a language. So in order for somebody on their saxophone to communicate with somebody on their guitar, there need to be a set of agreed principles that make communication possible between the musicians and between the audience listening, so that the audience listening can participate in the music as much as the musicians are participating together. That's kind of a long-winded way of saying I agree with you, but I also disagree with you. But, extremely important points made at the same time, Marcos. Let's see. That's right. Just Bob provides some excellent information here. He says EP extended play, LP long player, 78 a huge, 45 version, usually found in Victrola, although some turntables offered cause were made in the 60s and 70s. Yes. Actually, I have a record player that dates back to the late 1940s. It doesn't actually belong to me, but it belongs to our family, and it's a record player that dates back to 1949. And I have 1940s records that I play on that because it sounds epic on a 1940s record player, whereas it doesn't quite sound so epic on a much more modern turntable. I don't know why that is, but that is just the way it is. It may be something to do with how the turn, how the table actually turns and the size and the weight of the needles and those kind of things. Maybe that has something to do with it. And modern equipment is maybe too different. Martin says, and with CDs, one could also bring out those original masters and allow for 10-minute long songs to actually play out instead of being cut to 3 minutes. Yeah, absolutely. Mike has a good point there. Gannon says, funnily enough, I do sometimes tune the whole bass down to D when I play Dadgad, tuning on the guitar sometimes. Sometimes it needs that. Yeah, again, that's probably genre specific. You may not play that way all the time. Chat's just jumped again. So annoying when that happens. Yeah, cool. Thank you, Marcos. Excellent. About rules, I mean, no reverb, but insert. You have to put the bass this way or that way. You can't put less or more buried status to the vocals and more rules, all subjective. Yeah, those kind of mixing rules. Those are more like kind of how would you put it? The kind of givens, I think is the way to put it, which may not translate very well into any other language, particularly. But I think by a given, we mean it is a convention that has grown over time because it's something that is efficient. Like, my friend Joe Gilder puts it like this. He says, if you start putting reverbs on inserts of your channels, you will eventually have a situation where your system cannot handle the processing anymore. If you've got a vocal, a doubled vocal, and 5 backing vocals, and you want them all to sound as if they're in the same space and in the same 3D stereo, in the same point in the 3D stereo field, front, back, left and right, that's kind of our stereo field, then you would be wise, rather than put the same reverb instance on all of those channels of 5, 6, 7 channels, you would be much wiser to have a send to a single reverb on a single effects channel, and then you just vary the send amount to that reverb, depending upon how front or back you want the backing vocals in relation to the lead vocals. See, for lead vocals, I tend to not put a whole ton of reverb on them because I like my vocals to be nice and upfront and present, very present. But for things like backing vocals, I will allow much more reverb to be sent to them. Because if I do that, that pushes the backing vocals a little bit behind the lead vocal. And then that way they're never going to overwhelm. And especially with the way I use compression as well, they're never going to overwhelm the lead vocal, because I will use a faster attack on the compressor for the backing vocals as well as more reverb. So the kind of those two things in tandem to push the backing vocals further back. So rather than having 5 instances of a particular reverb on those 5 vocal tracks, I will just have a send from each one of those going to to a single instance of the reverb, because the system's not going to bog down, and it's just a heck of a lot more efficient, and also it's a lot more controllable. If you have a reverb as an insert on each of those backing vocal channels that we talked about, here's the thing you're going to run into, is the only way to control them is to control the mix knob on the individual instances of your reverb. Now, what if you decide you want to automate the volume of the vocals? Here's the thing that you're going to run into. if you decide in a certain section you want the backing vocals to be a little bit quieter, maybe a couple of dB quieter, you're going to run into a problem because the vocal will turn down, but the reverb mix will not. So this is where a send works over an insert for an ambient effect every time. And maybe this is something I should do a video on for 2021, is kind of the difference between ambient effects as an insert versus ambient effects as an effects channel send. Maybe I should do that. So in that sense, whilst there is no rule that says you cannot put a reverb directly as an insert on a channel, there are, there are conventions that suggest actually it is better if you don't. Okay? So not a rule, but there is a better way of doing it. So I hope you understand that. Bob Studio says, I saw an article recording 2 chords, Zappa style marimba runs. I always call them sus2. Same thing? I think so. Yes, I think so. If you're talking about what I think you're talking about a chord where instead of having a C major with the C, E, and Gs, you remove the major third and drop that major third down a tone, a whole step. So you end up with this kind of sound. So, if you wanted to go. Kind of sound a little bit weird, and so if you're into more sort of ambiguous sounding harmony, then those kind of chords are definitely something to go for. Excuse me. Yeah, so 2 chords or sus2 chords can sound really, really cool and ambiguous because there's no major third, so they're neither major nor minor. In that sense, they are ambiguous. So here's a thing you could do. You can close voice them like I just did here, where the 9th or the 2nd is right next to the root. Or you can make it a little bit more open, and you could put the D, the 2nd at the bottom, and then the 5th above it, and then the root at the top. And you get like a stack of 4ths instead, which can sound very, very cool as well. That can have a nice kind of open, ambiguous sound, or you could have that kind of close-voiced, equally ambiguous sound. The other cool chord that you could try is keep that C, D, G thing going. Instead of having the C as your root, have the A as your root. And you get an A minor 11 chord here. We're taking out the 5 of the chord, replacing it with the 4th, and you'd call that A minor 11. And this again could sound really nice close voiced like this. You could again open it out so it's a little bit more kind of in a stack of 4ths. In fact, Steely Dan made use of this to great effect in a song called Green Earrings. Where they basically take this A minor 11 chord and have the root here, then the 11, and then the 7th at the top. But to kind of give it a whole load more tension, they would, kind of move between this semitone below thing. So, yeah, sus2 chords, 11th chords, stacks of fourths, they can sound fantastic. Let's see. Music to Motion said, I saw an advertisement on Facebook today that said, you can buy a square foot of land in Scotland and get the title of Lord or Lady, really. Yet, there are some legitimate ways in which you can purchase for yourself a lordship. And there are land management companies here in Scotland that are trying to protect certain sections of forest and green belts and green areas and national parks and reserves and those kind of things here in Scotland. And so one of the ways in which they are doing this is by selling like a square foot of land, and then they give you the title of Lord of the nearest whatever county it is. And so you have that title, but you also own that little plot of land. And that basically means that if future developers come along and say, hey, we're going to build on this land, they can't because you own it. And they have to make a compulsory purchase order to you first of all. And you can say, no, I am not selling, and so on and so forth. But yes, it is possible. Let's see what else is there. Martin says, don't you also run into all kinds of phase problems with too many reverbs in the inserts? Not really. I mean, there are some, not very many, but there are some people that suggest that if you have different reverb sizes and different reverb types, that you can run into phase problems. But really, no. No, and mix engineers have used multiple reverbs and multiple reverb types and sizes within a mix for literally decades. For example, having a spring reverb for one particular instrument and a plate reverb for another. In fact, the Beatles did that frequently, where they would mix a spring and a plate reverb with an analog delay or something like that. So different types of reverbs, different sizes of reverbs are not really an issue. You don't encounter phase problems in that respect. Music to Motion chords. Music to Motion says, aren't those called augmented chords? No, they're not. Augmented chords are slightly different. An augmented chord, let's take this G major chord. So we've got a G, B, and a D. An augmented chord would mean that we would raise the fifth by a half step or a semitone to the D sharp, which is a completely different sound altogether. Okay? And these can be really cool. Augmented chords can be very cool. For example, you can do this. So augmented chords can be a really nice way to lead into a C chord. Or as what I did on that last one, I used a substitution. I went to D flat 7 to lead down to the C chord. And then a 2-5-1. 2-5-1. So, but I mean, you could go to the minor from there. I mean, that's kind of what it suggests that you're going to do. Because the D sharp would be, in the key of C minor, would be the E flat. Alright, so augmented chords are slightly a different thing. Lord Bob would be yes. Would I be responsible for the upkeep? I don't know. I know nothing about those things. What about the contrast of some instruments like ukulele or baritone guitar? Would there be phasing issues if using exactly the same reverb? Nope. No, there wouldn't. No, you wouldn't see those. You wouldn't see those things at all. Let's see. Raising the 5 would be a sort of sus chord. Yeah, it really isn't. It's more when you sharpen something like the 5 of a chord, it's an augmented chord. Or if you were to flatten the 5, that would be a diminished chord. And they're not really sus chords. The word sus is short for suspended. And the reason why it has that name is because it comes from the Baroque and early classical period, where an ending of a song would have this kind of a sound to it. Where the 4 here comes from the 5, the 7th of the 5 chord. So if I did this, let's see now. There's my 5 chord, and then if I leave that F there, which is the 7th of G, but would be the 4 of the new chord, and then you resolve it down to the 3rd. Alright, so if I play that again, so D minor 7. Okay, and that was very much a kind of classical or Baroque kind of thing. And it gets used quite a bit in popular music as well. ABBA made extensive use of this, you know, with you know. I mean, that's essentially, it's just a nice way to keep, like, a chord, a major chord, going, but adding some interest to it. So, there's the 3rd, then 2, 4, 3, 2, 2, 3. So, that's one way in which suspended chords become really useful. And there are another use of them would really, if you know, for example, if you want to change key. Hey, play the right notes. So I've just gone to the key of D major from C there by using this A sus4 resolved to the 3rd, which gives me the leading tone into D. So yeah, suspensions are incredibly useful. Mika says, sometimes I'll use a pre-fader send to send an alternative mix to another bus for a different tilt on the EQ. That is then sidechained to compress conditioning send signals is key. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Let's see. Good rendition of Raining in My Heart. Who sung it famously? Can't remember. But yes, that's kind of, I was playing roughly that. I was trying not to play it because I don't want to get a copyright strike. Thank you very much. Mika says, and this is the last question of the night, guys. Does a sus third need to be resolved to the third? You mean sus fourth, I think you mean. Why not resolve it to the fifth? Because it doesn't resolve. A suspended fourth resolves downwards to the third. Doesn't resolve upwards. I'll demonstrate. Using that same 2-5-1 thing. Hang on. Hey! Kind of doesn't really work. It's not really as effective. It's weak because the third in a major key, the third, in fact, in a minor key as well, but the third is a strong chord tone because it defines whether a chord is major or minor. So if we are strictly in a diatonic key and not modal, or non-tonal, or even microtonal, the third defines a major or minor chord or a major or minor key. So if I try and resolve that upwards, it doesn't really work. Now, do you see what I've done there? I kind of faked it because I went, and I did resolve the top note here up to the G, but the only way that would work is if I had the third in there as well. Doesn't resolve quite so neatly because the leading tone doesn't quite resolve in an effective way. There's a big leap there. It's a weak resolution. It does kind of work, but it's weak, which is why suspended fourths resolve downwards to the major or minor third. So, I mean, you can totally surprise your audience by, and this is done regularly in the Baroque period, particularly if the tune was a minor tune. Establishing the nice C minor key here. But if I was to do a minor 2-5-1 here, so we'd have the D minus 7 with the flattened 5. And there's my G7, there's my 4th or my 7th. And in the Baroque period, you could do this. And that is called a tierce de Picardi. It's a French term. It's a French invention. And it was invented in the Picardy region of France during the 16 teens, somewhere around that, 1618 to 1625, somewhere around that period. And they called it a tierce de Picardi, meaning the third of Picardy, the Picardy third. And so that's, kind of when you're playing in a minor key, but you resolve to the major at the end using that suspended thing. So, the 2-5-1 in the minor key. I kind of jazzed it up a little bit there, but essentially you get the idea. Kind of, and you make it major instead of minor. So there you go. Great question to finish the show with. So I appreciate everybody coming out. A big thank you to all those that have donated, including Music to Motion, who has just donated $5. Thank you very much. I appreciate that immensely. What a way to start the new year. $15 total in donations. That's fantastic. And some really, really great questions as well. So I appreciate all of that. I thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And I will see you over on Jonny's channel, Home Studio Trainer, on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified. Quite what we're going to talk about yet is up for discussion with him, but we will have a subject for you for the first Songwriting Simplified of 2021. So until then, folks, good night.